Hi friends, I know it's been a while, but I am back with a brand new tutorial and we're going to go over a brief overview of Procreate. We're going to get in depth with Inkscape and then I'll show you how I take those designs and make them work for the Glowforge and then how I cut and assemble them. So we have a lot of different material in here, but I hope that it will help if you have any questions about those programs. So this is just a quick overview of all of the materials. I used my iPad, the Procreate app, I used Inkscape on my laptop and the Glowforge website. I used 1/8 of an inch MDF for this project. I used Crazy Glue, but you can also use 3M tape or any other adhesive. And then I used a mixture of Rustoleum and Martha Stewart spray paint and a variety of paint pens. I like the Posca brand. I have a Glowforge, but you can adapt this to other lasers. So these materials will all be listed in the description box. So the very first thing I did was open Procreate in my iPad and I set up a new file. So I pick the 3600 by 3600 preset that I have set up, and I will go into the canvas information just to give you a little bit more of an understanding of why I like to set it up this way. If it was in inches, it would be 12 by 12 and it's 300 dpi, so it's a higher quality file. And for my particular iPad, I can have up to 11 layers. So then I just went in and started drawing my little mouse character. If you've been following my page, you know that I have a bunch of different animals, so I like to keep the eye shape consistent throughout. And you can see at some points I bring in references from my other drawings to help me because I struggle a little bit with getting the body shape right. But honestly, it's just all about having fun with it. So I decided instead of the bow, I wanted to give her a little flower crown, and I wanted to make her as cute and Valentine-y as possible. So at some point, I colored little sections of them. That's for the mock-up, and I'll show you in a minute how I like to export it without the color to turn it into that vector. But so through here, you just see me having trouble getting the body right. And the shape. I had the general idea of what I wanted to do, so I ended up actually referencing my giraffe to get the sitting pose right. And then from here I was pretty much done with that, so I just decided to color it, and that way I have my little mock-up for how I want it to look. So to save, I turn off the color and the background, so I just have that outline, and I'll explain why I have these different versions in a minute, but I have just the outline, which I save as a PNG, and then I have the outline with a black box where the flowers would go, and I save that as a PNG as well. And then I have the flower outline that I want to be a raised layer, so I save that separately as well. And then from there I just use the Google Photos app to bring it up on my laptop and open everything in Inkscape. The very first thing I want to do in Inkscape is to set up my document to match the cut area of my Glowforge bed. So I go to document properties, I change it to inches, and then I usually go with 19 by 10.5, and that way everything will be inside that engraving window. And then I just close that out and I have the right size. And then from here, I just have to open up the files that I just brought over to my computer from my iPad. And I can do that by doing File Open and finding my Downloads folder. And then I find the images that I saved to my computer. So like I said before, we have a couple different versions. There is this version that has that block at the top, and then there is the outline for the flowers that goes on top of that area, and I'll show you exactly why once we get these vectored. So what we did is we imported a PNG file, and the easiest way to turn this into a vector is to trace it. So you right click and do trace bitmap, and then this is the screen that pops up. So the reason I like to do it in black only is because I can just go with brightness cutoff, the default, hit that update, and it gives you a preview of what that trace is going to look like, and then I hit OK, and it gives me this. When you double click, you can see all of those boxes. They're called nodes. That doesn't have happen when you double click on the PNG. So when you double click on what you've traced, you can go in and manipulate those nodes and change that shape. So what I did is I cut that and I pasted it into my document that we had just set up. And then what I'm going to do here is to do the same thing for the little flower crown accent piece, and right click, trace bitmap, use the default settings that come up, click that update just to get a preview, and then you see it has that bounding box around just that part. So I copy that and paste it into my document. So from here we need to make something that the laser understands. So just to break it down, a fill will engrave and a stroke will cut. So what I'm doing here is I turned off the fill and I went in and made my stroke a 1 pixel width, and I made it red because in my files red means cut. So again, I went in and I turned off the fill. You can do that at the bottom where my cursor is, where there's that X, or you can right click and go to fill and stroke and then hit the X to remove the fill. Then under stroke paint I picked red, and under stroke style I did 1 pixel. So you can see that this little flower piece will fit on top of where that big empty section was, and so that will give it some depth. I wanted to add a layer on top of the mouse to make it look like those flowers were, coming out a little bit. And so if it was just like this, the laser would cut everything that is red. So we don't want that. So I did file break apart, and then you'll see when I highlighted it that all of those pieces are now separate. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to highlight everything but the outline and change it to blue, which means score. So everything that is blue will be a score instead of a cut, and that makes it more like a coloring book. So now I'm duplicating the flower crown, and I'm going to create a guide to color on that backer before you put that outline. So I'm duplicating that here, and I'm going to change it to blue, and I'm only highlighting the other things so that I can make them all the same blue so that the Glowforge sees it as the same step. And then I am putting that where it fits. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to inset that path, and you can do path inset. There's also a shortcut that shows there too. I did it twice, and then what that does is you can color with your paint pens in between those lines, but when you place that outline piece on top of it, you won't see any of the lines because they're slightly in a little bit, and the outline of those flowers is thicker than the outline in your coloring book, so to speak. So I'm showing you right here that when I place that red, that cut piece on top, you can't see the blue, and I'm going to change the color briefly just to show you how it hides that. And that way you have a guide and you know exactly where to glue that piece, and you can color in between those lines. So that is why I did that inset there. And then our next step is going to be grouping anything that is blue. So we're going to select everything that's blue, and then deselect anything that is red, because those are our cuts. And then what you do is you right click and hit group, and you see how it all becomes one piece, and that way you don't accidentally move anything that you don't mean to. So then we're going to duplicate the back. So I did Control C, Control V, and that's going to give us our backer. And so that's just by duplicating that cut line. And then I'm just arranging things here so they fit a little bit better on the cut bed, just so we can fit more. And I am rotating that backer just to help with that a little bit. So this way, when we're having our interchangeable piece, there's a backer, and then there is the front piece, but there's a cutout where that heart is. And so in a minute I'm going to add a little circle that you can pop out the hearts from the back, but basically you're just going to have a double layered piece, and if you use 1/8 MDF, it's going to essentially be 1/4 inch thick. So I just copied a bunch of those little hearts, and I'm going to show you real quick how I like to add text. And my favorite single line score font is Dear Agatha Sans 2, and I will link that in the description as well. So here I'm just kind of fiddling with the spacing, which is funny because I ended up changing it once it was in the Glowforge app anyway. But for the purpose of file making, you want to make things fit as snugly as you can so that you waste less material. So some people use nesting programs, and others just kind of, play with it until everything fits where it needs to be. But this way I only have to use one sheet of material, and I try to waste as little as possible. So if you look here, there is space for 4 additional hearts, and I'm going to add some cute conversation candy heart text, like you would see on those candies that everyone used to give out in elementary school on Valentine's Day. And like I said, my favorite font is Dear Agatha 2, and it comes with a script font and a sans all caps handwriting font, I guess. And so I'm starting with my cute little cutesy phrases. This one is Be Mine, and I zoomed in so you could see it. And what you need to do to make it laserable is path, object to path, and then I ungroup and group the letters in sections based on how I need to arrange them. So I grouped B and I grouped Mine, and that way I can move them both instead of having to move each individual letter. And then I centered everything on that one. So like I said earlier, my score is blue, and it's a blue stroke. And so you'll see me changing the colors probably more frequently than I needed to mess with it. I could have done it all at the end. But you just want to make sure that all of your scoring is the same and your cuts are all the same, and then your engraving, if you have any, would be a fill instead. But using the different colors tells Glowforge that it's a different function, and that way you can change it from cut to score for certain things and not others. But I'm just going to show you going through a couple more of these fonts. And like I said, you type out your text, and then you click on your text and do path, object to path, and then you ungroup it and group the sections that you need grouped together. I usually do it by word so that you don't have to move each individual letter. And then you can resize and adjust the stroke width and other things like that. I like to use this little alignment tool, and there's one, it's 3 over in that top row, and it puts everything along a center axis so that it's centered in that heart. And then here I am doing the same thing, turning off any fill, changing it to stroke blue and a width of 1 pixel just to be consistent. And I find that 1 pixel works really well for the scoreable fonts with the Glowforge. And if you don't know the difference between scoring and engraving, scoring is essentially a low-powered cut, and it will just kind of make a line. And when you engrave, it engraves deeper and it's darker and usually thicker, but it does take longer. So that's why some people like to do score over engrave. And then here I am just using the rotate tool to rotate that flower piece a tiny bit to make it fit better. And then I'm just going to go in and add the text to my last 2 little conversation hearts here. And for this file, I did cutesy words, but I also have a version that will come with the file bundle. And they are a little bit sassier, and they say sillier phrases. I have one that says F off. I have one that says nice butt, so they're more like adult phrases, and then I have the cutesy family appropriate ones as well. And then it'll also come with a dozen blank ones, so that if you want to engrave something on it or change the phrases to something else, you can really customize those however you want to make it. So then these are just showing you again, sped up a little bit, the process that I used for adding the text and centering everything. Again, just really get it in your head that you have to convert your text to a path. If you try to upload text to the Glowforge interface, it will tell you there's text and they've removed it. So these are steps that you have to take before you can use those files and sell those files. So then from here, I'm just double checking that all of my scoreable things have the same blue. That's just like a little thing that I should have just waited till the end to change them all, but you know, it makes me feel better to see them all while I'm working through the whole design. And then the last step here is we are going to add that little pop out hole so that we can push the conversation hearts out and change them. So before I did that, I just saved the file just because sometimes Inkscape crashes and I didn't want to lose anything. I made sure to save it as a plain SVG. I don't like to save it as an Inkscape SVG. Sometimes I have weird issues with doing that, so I use plain SVG. So then here what I did is I just matched it up so I would know exactly where that heart would take place. And so I made a little heart that isn't too big, but it's like big enough that you could stick your finger in it and pop out from the back, those hearts. And then I selected that outline and that little hole, and I did exclusion so that it becomes one piece, and then I put that back where it was and then saved it again, and that is the completed version of this file. Just to give you an idea of how this will work is that there's the backer, the one that has the hole in it, that you glue that front piece to, and that front piece becomes almost like a coloring book. You just follow in those lines with your paint pens, and then the heart piece is cut out so you can swap it for all of the hearts that we cut. So I will show you more in a little bit. If you're anything like me, that first method, the quote coloring book as I'm calling it, is not my favorite because I hate paint pens. So I'm going to show you a really easy, quick way to change this so it becomes like a puzzle instead. And so what I'm doing here is I'm selecting everything that's on my little mouse backer there, and I'm deselecting the flower piece at the top, the freckles, and the whiskers, because those I think have too many small pieces and I don't want to really mess with that. But I am selecting the outline, and then I do path exclusion, and you see how it turned it all red. So what that does is it gets rid of that negative space, and it makes it the cut lines that the laser will need to follow. And then the blue pieces stay score. These are just the colors that I use. You can color code it how you need to. But so then here I'm just showing again how I do save as, and I use the plain SVG, and make sure you save it as a different file so you don't overwrite what you were working on. And so just to kind of recap why I made the separate file versions, the first one is all one piece, so there's not a lot of assembly work, there's not a lot of gluing. You can just color in the lines. It's good for kids who want to, you know, use it like a DIY project to color themselves. This version is because I am terrible at coloring within the lines, and I would very much prefer just to separate all the little pieces out. So like the black outline, the eyes would all go in one pile, the leaves would go in another, the ear pieces, the face pieces, etc. And that way I can sort them by color, spray paint it, have it be much easier, much neater, and then I can just glue them all onto the backer. And then I guess just to be difficult, I decided I wanted to include just the character itself in case somebody wanted just a simple engraving file. And this is where we use that other PNG that we exported from the iPad. So it is the same exact steps here. You right click, do trace bitmap, and then you hit OK and it will trace. So then I cut it and paste it into my Glowforge size document, and Glowforge recognizes fills as engrave, so I change that to purple. That's just the color I use. And to make the backer, I duplicate, and then I break that apart and move just the outline piece. I delete all of the inside pieces because they're not needed, and change this from the fill to, again, I use red for cut, so I do a red cut line at 1 pixel, and here you'll see I accidentally did an inch and it was crazy looking, but I use 1 pixel for the width for my red cut lines, and that's just how I personally like to format things, just so I know what's what. And then I moved it over just to make sure it lines up, but I don't want my Glowforge cutting right on the edge of that engraving because I don't want it to cut any of it off. So I do path offset, and then it's control and then the 0 or the open parenthesis is the shortcut for that. So I do that a few times, and then I just save this because it's my little simple character formatted as a little engraving file. And again, I save it as plain SVG, and I really like this. I think it's cute. I think it would be adorable as a little Valentine. So now that I've shown you the 3 different versions, I just want to give you a little look at what the Glowforge cut process is like. So I will open the Glowforge app. It's app.glowforge.com. And then what I'm going to do is hit the create button and upload a file. And from here, I'm going to find the file that I saved. So this first one is the quote coloring book version that we talked about, and it takes a little bit to open. You can see down at the bottom right, it just says that it's processing and it's getting everything ready for us in their interface. So this is what it looks like when you first import it, and you can see on the side there are 2 little categories. So those are the 2 different colors that we had made in Inkscape. And I'm changing that first one to score and the second one to cut because those were the predefined options that we talked about earlier. And then all you need to do from here is you pick your material, and if my Glowforge was on and ready to go, I would hit up at the top right next to where it says offline. There would be a round button that I could click to send it to the printer. So this is what the Glowforge looks like with it's sped up, obviously. There is the scored hearts, and then they're cut out, and then it's scoring the mouse. So this, I just wanted to show you the difference between a score and a cut version by showing these time lapses. So this is what it looks like before I removed the pieces from the cut. And then this version is the actual cut version. So the only thing scored is the flower crown, the text, and the little whisker details. And you'll be able to see that all of the pieces, it becomes individual shapes for each one. And when you do the outline for your file making, you don't have to worry about creating the color pieces that go inside it, because the Glowforge cuts out the outline and it leaves that negative space. And so you only need the one file, because it gives you all of those pieces anyway without having to create all those individual pieces as well. And so this is obviously sped up for this full sheet of cuts. It took about 12 minutes. And then this last one, I just wanted to show you the engraving process. This is sped up like super fast. It took, I think, 10 minutes to engrave the little mouse. And for this one, I scaled it down to 5 inches just to show what like a cute little Valentine gift would be, like if your kids wanted to color these and give them out, or give them out with some colored pencils. And then you can see that it's cutting out all of the hearts for the interchangeable version. So I am really not that great at painting, so I'm not going to give a ton of tips on that. I'm just going to show you real quick what I did. So for the coloring book one, the score one, and the engraved mouse, I did them both with paint pens. For the littler one, I used some finer tip markers, and then I just used a variety of acrylic paint pens for both of them. Again, I think this little engraved version would be a really cute Valentine's gift that your kids could give out in their class, or, you know, even just for your kids to use. It's a lot of fun to color it. So this is just what the finished product for that one looks like. And like I said, I scaled this one down to about 5 inches. And then this is the scored version. This is the interchangeable version. I colored this one with paint pens as well, and it is pretty cute, I'd like to think. So then for the cut version, I used spray paint. And the easiest way is I sort by color. So I have like the leaves together, the fur of the mouse together, and then once I am done spray painting them, it's really easy to assemble. So here I'm just using some super glue, and I put the outline on first, and then it's pretty much like a puzzle. So you can put all of the pieces inside that outline, and it's like really easy to follow. Once you put that outline on, you know where every other piece goes. So for this one, I didn't use the 3M tape, but I do recommend using it. It just makes it a lot easier for this style of file. And so then here I just zoomed in a little bit so you could see the smaller pieces that I'm putting together. Like I said, I am not the best painter and I'm a little messy with assembling, but these are the way that they turned out. So my favorite is the spray painted one, but I think they all turned out really cute. Here's the one with like the silly hearts, and then here's just the two interchangeable files together. And then these are the regular, like the cutesy conversation hearts. And then another thing that's included in this file pack is a stand. So this stand looks like this, and it keeps it at the angle that it needs to keep the hearts inside. And basically what you do is you just glue these pieces together, and you assemble your little stand, and then you just sit the mouse on it, and I will show you in just a second why there's that hole in the back of it. But I'm just using my crazy glue and just gluing right in between where those little notches go. So what you do is you just place the little mouse on the stand, and it leaves access to the little hole to pop out the hearts. So it makes it really easy. You can just switch them out, and then here you can just see all the different ones I have from the different styles of phrases. So that is everything I have for you. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you stuck it out through this really long video. I hope that it helps you learn something, whether that something was an Inkscape tip, Procreate, Glowforge interface. I hope that you were able to get something out of this video. Again, thank you so much for watching.